Every single year, thousands of people die not because they lacked courage, not because they made reckless decisions, but because they trusted the wrong gear at the worst possible moment. They followed the advice of marketers dressed as experts, bought the products that looked impressive on shelves and in advertisements, and when the moment of true crisis arrived, when the infrastructure crumbled, when the supply lines broke, when the power grid went silent and the roads became impassable, those products failed them completely. This is not a theoretical concern. This is a pattern documented across every major disaster of the last 5 decades, from the systematic collapse of emergency response during Hurricane Katrina in 2005, to the prolonged grid failures in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria in 2017, to the deadly ice storms that paralyzed Texas in 2021 and left millions without heat, water, or communication for days. The pattern is always the same. People were sold complexity when they needed simplicity. They were sold novelty when they needed reliability. And they paid for that deception with suffering, and sometimes with their lives. The survival gear industry generates billions of dollars annually, and the fundamental incentive structure of that industry is not aligned with your survival. It is aligned with your purchase. There is a profound and dangerous difference between those two things. A product that looks sophisticated, that comes packaged with multiple functions and impressive specifications, that photographs well and carries endorsements from influencers and celebrities, that product sells. Whether it actually performs under genuine stress conditions, in rain, in cold, with shaking hands and an exhausted body and a mind operating under extreme cortisol load, is a secondary concern to the manufacturer. The engineering and emergency management communities have understood this gap for decades. FEMA's own post-disaster analysis reports consistently highlight that civilian preparedness fails not at the level of intention but at the level of equipment reliability and skill integration. People own gear they cannot use effectively. They own tools that malfunction under environmental stress. They own kits assembled by algorithm rather than by field-tested survival logic. To understand which tools actually matter, you must first understand what collapse actually does to a human being's operational capacity. When a genuine large-scale emergency occurs, the kind that overwhelms emergency services, disrupts utilities, and forces individuals into self-reliance for 72 hours or more, the human body and mind enter a physiological state that fundamentally degrades fine motor skills, complex reasoning, and technical proficiency. The stress hormone cortisol surges. Adrenaline narrows cognitive focus. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for complex decision-making and learned skill execution, becomes less dominant. What this means in practical terms is that the gear you chose during calm, rational planning must be operable by a version of yourself that is frightened, possibly injured, possibly sleep-deprived, and operating in darkness, cold, or extreme heat. This is why military survival doctrine has always prioritized simplicity and robustness over sophistication. The United States Army Survival Manual, FM 3-05-70, does not recommend multifunction electronic devices as primary survival tools. It emphasizes tools that require minimal mechanical knowledge, resist environmental degradation, and serve fundamental physiological needs directly. Those fundamental physiological needs are the architecture around which legitimate survival gear must be built. The human body requires core temperature maintenance above 35 degrees Celsius to avoid hypothermia-induced organ failure. It requires hydration sufficient to maintain kidney function and cognitive performance, approximately 2 to 3 liters per day under moderate exertion in temperate conditions, significantly more in heat or under physical stress. It requires caloric intake sufficient to sustain basic metabolic function and physical activity. It requires the ability to signal for rescue or communicate with other survivors. It requires protection from physical trauma and the ability to manage wounds before infection sets in. It requires navigation capability when landmarks, roads, and digital infrastructure are unavailable. And it requires the ability to process raw materials from the environment, wood, water, wild food sources, into usable survival inputs. Every single one of these requirements has been understood for centuries. The science behind them has not changed. What has changed is the marketplace that has grown around them, deliberately obscuring these simple requirements behind layers of product complexity and manufactured urgency. The first tool, and the one most consistently underestimated, misunderstood, and purchased in dangerously inferior versions, is the fixed-blade knife. Not a multi-tool. Not a folding knife with 7 attachments. A single, fixed-blade knife with a full-tang construction, meaning the steel runs continuously from the tip of the blade through the entire length of the handle, creating a single unified piece of metal. The engineering reason for this is non-negotiable. Folding mechanisms and jointed tools introduce mechanical failure points. Under heavy use conditions, battening wood, constructing shelter, processing animal protein, cutting rope under tension, these failure points are not hypothetical. They are statistical certainties over time. A full-tang fixed blade with a blade length between 4 and 6 inches, constructed from high-carbon steel rather than stainless steel, offers a combination of edge retention, repairability, and structural integrity that no folding tool can match. High-carbon steel, despite its greater susceptibility to surface oxidation, can be resharpened in the field using almost any rough stone surface, a capability that stainless steel blades, with their harder and more brittle molecular structure, cannot reliably offer. When your primary cutting tool loses its edge 30 miles from the nearest hardware store, the ability to restore that edge using a flat piece of riverside granite is not a minor convenience. It is the difference between functional capability and dangerous helplessness. The second tool that has been systematically misrepresented by the survival industry is the water filtration system. Walk into any outdoor retailer or scroll through any preparedness website and you will be confronted with an overwhelming array of electronic purification devices, ultraviolet light wands, multi-stage pump filters with replaceable cartridges, and chemically complex tablet systems that require precise dosing knowledge. The marketing language around these products emphasizes convenience and speed. What it does not emphasize is failure rate under field conditions. A 2019 analysis published in the Wilderness and Environmental Medicine Journal documented that pump-based filtration systems showed significant mechanical degradation after repeated freezing and thawing cycles, a condition that is not exotic but routine in any temperate or mountainous environment during seasonal transitions. The tool that consistently outperforms every electronic and mechanical alternative in long-term reliability testing is the ceramic gravity filter, a passive system requiring no moving parts, no batteries, no pumping mechanism, and no technical knowledge beyond basic assembly. Gravity does the work. Ceramic pores at 0.2 microns eliminate protozoa, bacteria, and most biological contaminants with zero mechanical complexity. When everything else fails, physics does not. The third tool is fire-starting capability, but not in the form that most preparedness kits contain. The standard lighter and the waterproof match container are not wrong choices, but they are incomplete ones. What collapse scenarios consistently reveal is that fire starting fails not because people lack ignition sources, but because they lack the knowledge and materials to sustain ignition into a functional flame. A ferrocerium rod, a manufactured alloy that produces sparks at approximately 3,000 degrees Celsius when struck with a steel edge, is the correct primary ignition tool because it functions when wet, functions in high-altitude low-oxygen environments, and contains enough material for thousands of strikes. But the ferrocerium rod is only as effective as the tinder preparation surrounding its use. Fine dry plant fiber, birch bark containing high concentrations of flammable betulin oil, or commercially prepared fatwood shavings from resin-saturated pine heartwood, these materials transform an ignition source into a survival capability. Fire in a collapse scenario is not comfort. It is core temperature regulation, water sterilization through boiling, signal generation visible for miles, psychological stabilization proven by military psychological operations research to reduce panic response, and food safety through protein denaturation. Every one of those functions is a survival-critical system, and all of them depend on a fire-starting capability that works on the first attempt in wet, cold, and exhausted conditions. The fourth tool is a quality emergency bivouac shelter, specifically a double-walled emergency bivvy constructed from aluminized polyethylene rather than the single-layer mylar emergency blankets sold in most basic kits. The thermodynamic difference between these two products is not marginal. Single-layer mylar reflects radiant heat but does nothing to address convective heat loss, which occurs when moving air strips the thin insulating boundary layer from the body surface. In wind conditions above 15 km per hour, a single mylar blanket provides dangerously inadequate protection. A double-walled bivy creates a sealed air gap that dramatically reduces convective loss while maintaining radiant reflection, and its structural integrity allows it to function as a ground barrier, reducing conductive heat transfer to cold earth, which can drain core body temperature at a rate 6 times faster than cold air exposure alone. The U.S. Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine has documented that ground insulation is the single most overlooked element in civilian cold weather survival preparation. The fifth tool is a quality orienteering compass paired with a waterproofed topographic map of your operational area. When digital navigation fails, and in a true infrastructure collapse it will fail completely as cell towers lose backup power within 72 hours, the ability to navigate using magnetic north, terrain association, and map reading becomes the foundational skill separating people who reach safety from people who exhaust themselves traveling in circles. The sixth tool is a signaling mirror, a piece of technology so simple and so effective that it remains standard equipment in military survival kits worldwide, because a signal mirror in direct sunlight produces a flash visible to aircraft at distances exceeding 60 kilometers. The seventh and final tool is a tourniquet, specifically a properly constructed windlass tourniquet like the CAT or SOFTTW, both of which have been validated by military combat medicine research to control extremity hemorrhage effectively when applied correctly. Uncontrolled bleeding is the leading cause of preventable death in trauma scenarios. These 7 tools, fixed blade, ceramic filter, fire system, quality bivy, compass with map, signal mirror, and tourniquet, address every primary survival failure mode documented across real collapse events. Not gadgets. Not electronics. Not complexity. Proven, simple, robust systems built on physics, biology, and decades of hard field evidence. That is what survival actually looks like when the world stops pretending everything is fine.